Picture this, a room so heavy with secrets it feels like the air could crack. The Pentagon's Hall of Valor gleams with polished marble, rows of officers in starched uniforms, their medals catching the light like tiny beacons of pride. Among them sits Colonel Marcus Tate, retired, a man whose life is measured in combat tours and ironclad discipline. He sips bitter coffee, expecting another predictable ceremony, his mind half on the colleague he's here to honor. He hasn't spoken to his daughter, Abigail Voss, in 4 years, not since he scoffed, "Words don't win wars, Abigail. Soldiers do." To him, her obsession with languages was a weak substitute for his world of grit and glory. But tonight, the ground beneath him shifts. General Harper, a battle-scarred legend with a voice like gravel, steps to the podium. No folder, no script. He leans forward, eyes scanning the room, and drops 5 words that hit like a shockwave. "We need shadow Cipher here." Whispers ripple. Marcus chuckles, thinking it's some elite operative. Then, from row 5, Abigail rises, plain suit, no insignia, her gaze steady as steel. Marcus's cup trembles. His daughter, the one he called useless, is the CIA's phantom, the woman who stopped wars with whispers. The room stands saluting. Marcus doesn't move, his world collapsing as Abigail steps into the truth. Hey, if that moment gave you chills like it did us, hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe to join our community of story lovers. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what's got you hooked on Abigail's journey? The Pentagon's air is electric, charged with the weight of unspoken truths. Abigail Voss, 34, isn't the soldier Marcus wanted. She's something sharper, a linguist fluent in 8 languages, each one a weapon honed in the shadows of global conflicts. From foiling arms deals in Yemen to decoding threats in Kiev, her work has saved lives, all while her name stayed buried in classified files. Marcus, though, saw only failure in her books and late-night radio static, calling them soft compared to his battlefield scars. Tonight, he's here, invited under false pretenses, unaware that Abigail, Shadow Cipher, is the real honoree. As she walks down the aisle, her footsteps echo like a ticking bomb. Officers who've whispered about Shadow Cipher, the ghost who unravels threats no one else can, stare in awe. Abigail's heart races, but her face is a mask of calm. She knows what's at stake. A year ago, a Yemen mission imploded when her real name leaked over a compromised channel, triggering an ambush that nearly cost her team everything. The trail leads back to a data protocol Marcus signed off on, a protocol now tied to a shadowy contractor. Is it negligence or something darker? General Harper's voice cuts through again. Shadow Cipher has kept us safe, without ever asking for glory. The silence that follows is deafening. Every eye on Abigail, except Marcus's, which are locked in shock. He's not saluting, not yet, but something in him breaks. Pride, denial, or maybe the wall he built between them. Abigail doesn't speak. Her presence is enough, a living defiance of every time Marcus dismissed her. But this isn't just about proving him wrong. There's a deeper game here, a leak that smells like sabotage, a conspiracy buried in CIA servers, and a question no one dares ask. Did Marcus know? As she returns to her seat, the room still standing, Abigail feels the weight of their stares. Shadow Cipher isn't just her codename anymore. It's a signal that the truth is coming, and it won't stay silent for long. The Pentagon's echo still lingers, that moment when Abigail Voss stood as Shadow Cipher, her father's stunned silence louder than any salute. But to understand how she became the CIA's unseen force, we have to rewind to a small house in Quantico, Virginia, where a girl learned to listen before she ever spoke. Abigail, barely 10, grew up in a home where silence wasn't peace. It was a warning. Her father, Colonel Marcus Tate, carried himself like war was his backbone, his voice sharp with commands, his approval reserved for those who bled for it. Her mother, Eleanor, was fading under the weight of multiple sclerosis, her laughter replaced by shallow breaths. By 8, Abigail was washing her mother's hair, memorizing the soft hums of a woman who could no longer sing. The house felt like a battlefield, not of fists but of expectations, where Marcus's disappointment cut deeper than any knife. "Books won't make you strong," he'd say, glancing at Abigail's dog-eared novels, his eyes dismissing her as if she were already invisible. But Abigail found a lifeline in the dark, a battered ham radio, scavenged from a neighbor's garage sale. At night, under the hum of Quantico's cicadas, she'd twist its dials, chasing faint voices through static. A French news broadcast, a Spanish love ballad, a heated Arabic debate from a distant city. They crack her world open. Each word was a door, each language a map to a place Marcus couldn't touch. By 11, she was scribbling phrases in a notebook hidden under her floorboard, teaching herself Russian from a library cassette, Italian from a pen pal's letters. Her father caught her once muttering, "That's not discipline." But to Abigail, it was freedom. Every syllable she mastered was a step away from his shadow, a quiet rebellion against a man who saw strength only in rifles and ranks. Her mother's illness worsened, and by 12, Abigail was her caretaker, braiding Eleanor's hair while whispering German lullabies she'd learned from the radio. Those moments were her refuge, the only softness in a house where Marcus ate alone, his phone pressed to one ear, his boots claiming the other chair. He'd skim Abigail's report cards, nodding only at math, ignoring her perfect scores in literature. "Field manuals matter," he'd grunt. "Poetry doesn't." But Abigail wasn't listening anymore. She was tuning into voices from Moscow, Cairo, Bogota, places that whispered of a world bigger than her father's rules. One night, she caught a faint signal, a woman's voice in Mandarin, urgent, pleading. Abigail didn't understand it yet, but the desperation in the tone burned into her. She vowed to learn, to decode not just words but the human truths behind them. That vow became her armor. By 15, she spoke 4 languages, her journals filled with verb conjugations and slang no textbook taught. She practiced in secret, whispering to herself in the mirror, knowing Marcus would never hear her. But the radio did. It was her first partner, her first confidant, teaching her that listening was power. Years later, that same instinct would make her shadow Cipher, the CIA's ghost who heard what others missed. But back then, she was just a girl, clutching a radio, building a world where her voice mattered. And somewhere in those crackling signals was a clue to a secret Marcus didn't know, a contract he'd signed, a decision he'd made that would one day haunt them both. What was it, and how would it tie to the betrayal waiting in Yemen? The static held no answers yet, but Abigail was already learning. The truth lives in the pauses, and she was ready to listen. Hey, if Abigail's story is hitting home, let us know in the comments. What's a moment in your life where you found strength in something others overlooked? Like, share, and subscribe to keep these stories coming. The static of Abigail Voss's childhood radio still hums in her memory, each crackle a step toward becoming Shadow Cipher, the CIA's unseen savior revealed at the Pentagon. But before she stood in that spotlight, defying her father's dismissal, she was a teenager in Quantico, forging her own path with words as her weapons. Colonel Marcus Tate's house was a fortress of discipline, where silence was a reprimand and approval was a medal Abigail never earned. Marcus, a man who worshipped the tangible, rifles, medals, scars, saw his daughter's obsession with languages as a waste. "Words don't stop bullets," he'd say, his voice clipped, his eyes skimming past her to the next mission brief on his desk. At 16, Abigail was invisible to him, her report cards tossed aside unless they showed math scores, her books mocked as useless. But in the quiet of her room, she was building an arsenal, one syllable at a time, each language a rebellion against the man who measured worth in blood. By day, Abigail was the dutiful daughter, saying yes, sir, and no, sir, her voice small to avoid Marcus's disapproval. By night, she was a linguist in secret, her floorboard hiding journals filled with 8 languages, Russian, Arabic, Mandarin, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, and Farsi. She learned from smuggled library tapes, a Moroccan grocer who taught her slang over tea, and late-night radio broadcasts that carried voices from places Marcus would never go. Each phrase was a brick in a wall he couldn't climb, a defiance of his belief that only soldiers mattered. When she spoke her first full sentence in Farsi at a school talent show, her classmates clapped, but Marcus, in the back row, just frowned. "That won't get you through basic training," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. She didn't flinch. Instead, she added another language to her list, whispering conjugations like prayers. Abigail's journals weren't just notes. They were her battlefield. Pages brimmed with idioms, syntax, cultural quirks, each entry a silent vow to prove Marcus wrong. She didn't need his approval. She needed her own. At 17, she decoded a Polish radio signal about a border protest, her heart racing as she pieced together its meaning. It wasn't just words, it was power, the kind Marcus couldn't see. He wanted her to be a soldier, but she was becoming something else, a listener who could unravel secrets in the spaces between words. Her mother, Eleanor, better than now, was her only ally, smiling faintly when Abigail read her Portuguese poetry. "You're building bridges," Eleanor whispered once, her voice weak but proud. Those words became Abigail's mantra, even as Marcus's silence grew heavier. But there was a shadow in her defiance, a hint of something Marcus had touched years before, a data protocol he'd signed off on during a Pentagon contract, buried in files Abigail hadn't yet seen. It was a decision that would one day collide with her life in Yemen, where her name would crackle over a compromised channel, threatening everything she'd built. For now, though, she was a girl with a pen, a radio, and a fire no one could douse. Each language she mastered was a key to a door Marcus couldn't lock, a step toward the moment she'd stand as Shadow Cipher. But would her defiance outlast the betrayal waiting in the wings? The journals held her secrets, but the truth was still out there, encoded in a past Marcus couldn't erase. Hey, if Abigail's quiet rebellion resonates with you, drop a comment. When have you turned someone's doubt into your strength? Like, share, and subscribe to stay with us on this journey. The fire of Abigail Voss's teenage defiance, etched in 8 languages across hidden journals, carried her from a silent Quantico home to the CIA's shadowed ranks as Shadow Cipher. Each word she mastered was a step toward the Pentagon moment where her father, Colonel Marcus Tate, saw her true worth. But before that triumph, a darker chapter unfolded, one that nearly buried her. In the scorching dust of Yemen's Al-Baida region, Abigail was embedded with a covert CIA team, posing as a cultural liaison for a humanitarian aid mission. Beneath the surface, the operation was a high-stakes hunt for a financier fueling an arms network across 3 continents. Abigail's role was to decode encrypted chatter, her 8 languages unraveling dialects no machine could parse. The air was tense, the team's radios crackling with coded updates, when a voice, not local, not friendly, cut through the secure channel. Abigail Voss, it said, her real name slicing through the static like a blade. Her blood ran cold. The soldier beside her, Lieutenant Caleb Dunn, froze, his rifle half raised. "How the hell do they know you?" he hissed. She had no answer, but the ambush that followed did. Explosions tore through the desert night, shattering the team's convoy. A roadside IED flipped their vehicle, and sniper rounds pinned them behind smoldering wreckage. Abigail pressed a scarf to Caleb's bleeding shoulder, her mind racing as she scanned the radio for clues. The enemy knew their coordinates, their timing, her name. Not Shadow Cipher, but Abigail. 3 local informants vanished into the chaos, and their safe house was already burning when they reached it. Airlifted to Sanaa under blackout protocols, Abigail faced a grim debrief. 2 CIA officers, faces like stone, handed her a sealed folder. Inside, a transcript highlighted her name in red, tied to a compromised data protocol authorized years ago by Marcus Tate, now a retired consultant. The breach wasn't random, it was surgical, and it smelled like sabotage. Coincidence, one officer muttered, but his eyes said otherwise. Abigail's gut screamed betrayal, not from enemies abroad, but from someone inside, someone close. Back in a sterile Langley holding room, the questions came fast. Had she shared her identity? Left equipment unsecured? Contacted outsiders? Abigail answered calmly, her voice steady despite the weight of suspicion. I don't know how they got my name, she said, but it wasn't me. The officers exchanged glances, wrote notes, and dismissed her without a word. She was pulled from the field, reassigned to a desk in Berlin, administrative purgatory, they called it. But Abigail knew better. This was exile, a way to silence her while the real traitor hid. The protocol Marcus signed off on, tied to a shadowy contractor called Horizon Dynamics, wasn't just a mistake. It was a thread in a larger web. Why had her father's name surfaced now, years after he left active duty? Was he careless or complicit? The answers were buried in encrypted files she couldn't yet access, but Abigail wasn't done. She'd spent her life listening to the spaces between words, and this silence was screaming. As she boarded a plane to Berlin, the folder's red ink burned in her mind. Someone had sold her out, and the trail led back to Marcus, or someone using his name. The Yemen ambush wasn't just a mission failure, it was a warning. Whoever orchestrated it wanted her erased, but they didn't know Abigail Voss. She'd built her life decoding the impossible, and this was just another language, one of lies, power, and family secrets. In Berlin, she'd start digging, not for revenge, but for truth. And when she found it, the shadows wouldn't protect the guilty, not even her father. Hey, if that twist left you reeling, tell us in the comments. What would you do if trust was broken that close to home? Like, share, and subscribe to keep unraveling this story with us. The dust of Yemen's ambush still clung to Abigail Voss's memory, her real name echoing over a compromised radio, a betrayal tied to her father, Colonel Marcus Tate. That moment in Al Beta, where bullets and betrayal nearly buried her, drove her from the CIA's covert front lines to a sterile desk in Berlin, a city as gray as her exile. Officially, it was administrative reassignment, but Abigail knew the truth. She was sidelined, a ghost marked by suspicion. The CIA's Langley debrief had left her with a folder, her name in red ink linked to a flawed data protocol Marcus authorized years ago for Horizon Dynamics, a murky contractor. The breach wasn't an accident. It was a blade aimed at her, and the question gnawed. Was her father negligent, or was he hiding something darker? In Berlin, surrounded by humming servers and endless reports, Abigail didn't sulk. She sharpened her instincts, determined to unravel the conspiracy that burned her. The truth was out there, buried in digital shadows, and she'd spent her life decoding the impossible. Berlin's CIA station was a cold fortress of glass and steel, its analysts churning through data like ghosts themselves. Abigail's new role was translation without context, summaries of intercepted chatter, stripped of meaning. It felt like punishment, but she turned it into a weapon. Late at night, when the office emptied, she accessed dormant archives through a backdoor she'd built during a Baltic operation years ago. Using a burner laptop, she traced the Yemen breach to Horizon Dynamics Data Lattice, a system Marcus had greenlit as a Pentagon consultant. The contract, buried in 6-year-old files, bore his digital signature, Marcus Tate, C3 clearance, temporary authority. Temporary. The word stuck like a splinter. Why would a retired colonel have high-level access for a single project? She dug deeper, cross-referencing metadata, timestamps, IP logs. A pattern emerged. Horizon's lattice had a hidden back channel, a flaw too precise to be accidental. It was the same channel that leaked her name in Yemen. The deeper she went, the uglier it got. Horizon Dynamics wasn't just a contractor. It was a shell linked to a Reston, Virginia, consultancy where Marcus still advised. A 2:47 a.m. login from a legacy terminal, tagged to his credentials, approved the lattice's deployment 3 months before Yemen. Abigail's pulse quickened. Was he careless or complicit? Another file surfaced, a memo from a retired general, once Marcus's mentor, recommending Horizon for expedited clearance. No audits, no oversight. Her father's signature was the final stamp. The evidence wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a lit fuse. Someone had used his access, maybe with his knowledge, to sabotage her mission. The why was murkier. Money, favors, or something personal. Abigail's hands shook as she saved the files to an encrypted drive, her mind flashing to Marcus's cold dismissals, his voice calling her languages useless. Had he sold her out to protect his legacy? Berlin's rain streaked the window as she stared at her reflection, a woman forged in defiance, but now facing a truth that could break her. She wasn't just fighting a conspiracy. She was fighting the ghost of her father's approval, a shadow she'd outrun until now. The files were enough to accuse, but not to convict. She needed more, and Berlin was just the beginning. Someone wanted Shadow Cipher erased, but they'd underestimated her. 8 languages, countless missions, and a lifetime of listening had taught her one thing. The truth hides in patterns, and she was a master at finding them. As she shut her laptop, a new question burned. Who else was in on it, and how far did this web stretch? The answers waited, not in Berlin's archives, but in the CIA's next move, a move that would bring her face to face with Marcus again. Hey, if Abigail's hunt for truth has you on edge, drop a comment. What's a secret you've uncovered that changed everything? Like, share, and subscribe to stay locked in for what's next. The Berlin rain still streaked Abigail Voss's window, each drop a reminder of the Yemen ambush that nearly erased her, her name betrayed over a radio tied to her father's past. The files she uncovered, Marcus Tate's signature on a Horizon Dynamics contract, a hidden backchannel leaking her identity, pointed to sabotage, but not proof. Exiled to a CIA desk, Abigail wasn't done. She'd spent her life decoding the unsaid, and now, in the quiet of Berlin's sterile station, she crafted her boldest move yet. The truth was a puzzle, and she held the pieces. Metadata, timestamps, a conspiracy buried in her father's negligence, or worse. But accusing Marcus directly was a risk she couldn't take. The CIA didn't reward whistleblowers, it buried them. So, Abigail became someone else, slipping into the shadows she knew best to expose a betrayal that threatened more than her name. The system had marked her once, but Shadow Cipher was about to mark it back. Under the alias Claire Holt, a dormant identity from a Moldovan disinformation op, Abigail drafted a report, 7 pages of surgical precision. No names, just facts. The Yemen breach, the Horizon data lattice, the unauthorized backchannel, and a trail leading to a C3 clearance signature from a Virginia consultancy. She coded references to obscure servers, buried the metadata in footnotes, and routed it through a secure CIA channel to Oversight Unit 4, the agency's silent cleaners. It wasn't an accusation. It was a map, letting the truth speak for itself. Abigail knew OU4 didn't play games. They hunted anomalies, not headlines. Sending it as Claire Holt kept her safe, a ghost within a ghost, while the report landed like a spark in dry grass. She sat back, heart steady, watching the encrypted server blink. The response came fast. Anomaly verified. Escalation initiated. Source protected. They were listening, and the net was closing. Days later, Berlin's hum felt different. Abigail monitored internal CIA traffic from her desk, catching subtle shifts, logins flagged, contractor files pulled for review. Horizon Dynamics was quietly audited, its Reston office flagged for irregularities. No one named Marcus, but Abigail felt his shadow in the chatter. Her report had stirred the hive, but the real sting was coming. OU4's moves were subtle. 3 contractors tied to Horizon were sidelined, their clearances frozen. A classified memo circulated, mentioning a ceremonial review at Langley for retired advisors. Marcus's name was on the list. Abigail's breath caught. This wasn't a tribute. It was a trap, a stage to expose the guilty without a press release. She knew the CIA's playbook. They didn't burn traitors publicly. They let them unravel in rooms full of knowing eyes. And she'd be there, not as Claire Holt, but as Shadow Cipher, the ghost they couldn't ignore. The report was her gambit, but it came with a cost. Abigail stared at her encrypted drive, the files tying Marcus to the breach glowing like a confession she hadn't written. Was he a pawn, signing off on a deal he didn't understand? Or a player protecting his own? The question haunted her, not just as a daughter, but as an operative who'd learned that truth cuts deeper than loyalty. As she packed for Langley, the ceremony looming, she felt the weight of what was coming. Marcus would face her, not just as his daughter, but as the woman who'd turned his silence against him. And somewhere in that room, the truth would step forward, whether he was ready or not. What would he do when the CIA's spotlight found him? Abigail didn't know, but she was ready to listen to the silence that followed. Hey, if Abigail's bold move has you hooked, drop a comment. What's a time you took a stand in secret? Like, share, and subscribe to keep unraveling this conspiracy with us. The Berlin server's hum still echoed in Abigail Voss's mind, her alias Claire Holt's report igniting a silent storm within the CIA. Her Yemen ambush, tied to her father Marcus Tate's signature on a compromised Horizon Dynamics contract, had pushed her to expose a betrayal without breaking cover. Now, the CIA's next move was unfolding, a carefully staged ceremony at Langley, dressed up as a tribute to retired advisors. Abigail knew it was no celebration. It was a reckoning, a trap woven with the precision only the agency could muster. Marcus, invited under the guise of honor, would face a room where whispers carried more weight than medals. And Abigail, the ghost who'd sparked it all, would be there, not to accuse, but to be seen. The truth she'd uncovered was a fuse, and Langley's polished halls were about to light up. Shadow Cipher was no longer a codename. It was a signal that the past couldn't stay buried. The Langley auditorium gleamed with sterile elegance, marble floors, rows of officers in crisp uniforms, their murmurs a low hum beneath flickering chandeliers. Marcus Tate sat near the front, his posture rigid, his retired colonel's lapel pin catching the light. He thought he was here for a colleague, another nod to his decorated past. Abigail, in row 6, wore a plain blazer, no rank, no name tag, her face a mask of calm. She'd been summoned with a cryptic note. Attend. Observe. Standard protocol. But she knew better. This was her moment, orchestrated by Oversight Unit 4. The air felt heavy, like the pause before a storm. As the ceremony began, an aide read names, vague titles like Project Liaison 7 or Consultant Delta. Polite applause followed, but Abigail felt eyes darting, searching for something unspoken. Then General Harper took the stage, his presence commanding, his voice like gravel over steel. Tonight, he said, we honor those who serve without spotlight, whose work shapes wars no one sees. Marcus nodded, oblivious. Harper paused, his gaze sweeping the room, then landed on 5 words. We need Shadow Cipher here. The auditorium froze. Marcus's head tilted, confused, expecting a stranger. Abigail stood, her steps deliberate, echoing in the silence. Officers whispered, Shadow Cipher, the ghost who'd unraveled threats from Yemen to Kiev. Marcus turned, his eyes locking on his daughter. His face drained, not of pride, but of certainty. The room rose, saluting, a wave of respect that drowned his disbelief. Abigail didn't smile.
She didn't need to.
Her presence was the verdict, a living rebuke to every time Marcus called her languages useless. As she reached the stage, Harper stepped back, offering only a nod. No speech, no medal, just truth. Abigail faced the crowd, her eyes finding Marcus. He stood now, not out of duty, but as if gravity demanded it. His jaw twitched, a man recalibrating a lifetime of assumptions. The silence was louder than any applause, heavy with the weight of what he'd missed, his daughter, the CIA's phantom, saving lives while he looked away. But beneath the moment's triumph, a shadow lingered. The Horizon contract, Marcus's signature, the Yemen leak, they weren't accidents. Someone had used him, or he'd let them. And this ceremony was the CIA's way of saying they knew. Would Marcus connect the dots, or was he already hiding from them? Abigail returned to her seat, the room still standing, but her mind was on what came next. The truth was out, but the guilty were still in play, and Langley's game wasn't over. Hey, if that moment hit you like it did us, drop a comment. What's a time you proved someone wrong without saying a word? Like, share, and subscribe to see how this showdown unfolds. The Langley auditorium silence still lingered, Abigail Voss's unveiling as Shadow Cipher forcing her father, Marcus Tate, to face the daughter he'd dismissed. The CIA's stage ceremony had been a masterstroke, exposing her worth while hinting at his role in the Yemen breach, a compromised Horizon Dynamics contract bearing his signature. Abigail, the ghost who'd sparked this reckoning with her anonymous report, felt the weight of every salute, but the real question burned. Was Marcus a pawn or a player in the betrayal that nearly killed her? The truth was close, and Langley's sterile halls were about to witness a confession no one expected. Abigail wasn't there to gloat. She was there to listen. Her years of decoding silences now tuned to the man who'd raised her to feel invisible. But in the quiet after the ceremony, Marcus would speak, and the words would shift their fractured bond forever. Marcus didn't linger for the reception's polite handshakes or forced small talk. He slipped out a side door, his polished shoes heavy on the pavement, his retired colonel's pin glinting under Langley's floodlights. Abigail watched from a distance, her heart steady, but her mind racing. He stood by his car, staring at the horizon, gripping his phone like it could anchor him. Then he dialed, a call Abigail later learned about through a CIA interceptor ally, Agent Ryan Holt, flagged. Marcus called an old comrade, General Vernon Cole, his voice low but raw. "Vern, you ever hear of Shadow Cipher?" A pause, then Cole's reply. "Don't know her name, but I know the ops. Shadow Cipher's in the file, the mission levs." Marcus exhaled, a sound like something breaking inside. "Say that again," he rasped. Cole repeated. "Every team with Shadow Cipher came home. She's the real deal." Marcus hung up, silent, his world realigning around a daughter he'd never seen. Days later, an encrypted CIA alert pinged Abigail's Berlin desk. Subject: disciplinary hearing, case 892-C, internal compromise. Marcus had walked into a secure Arlington conference room, uninvited, facing a panel of ethics officers and auditors. No fanfare, no defense. He sat, shoulders square, and said 7 words. "I approved a contract I didn't vet." The room stilled. He admitted signing off on Horizon Dynamics data lattice 6 years ago, pushed by a trusted general's recommendation, no questions asked. The lattice's back channel, the one that leaked Abigail's name in Yemen, was a flaw he hadn't caught, or hadn't wanted to. "I made a critical error," he said, voice steady. Asked if he knew who flagged the breach, he looked at the panel and said, "No, but I owe her everything." He never said Abigail's name, but his final request was clear. "Keep my daughter's name off the records." The CIA accepted his statement. Marcus lost his clearance, his consulting roles, his titles. No public scandal, just a quiet exit. Abigail read the transcript in Berlin, her coffee cold, her chest tight. It wasn't guilt, he confessed. It was negligence, a sin of omission that let someone else's betrayal slip through. But his plea to protect her name was new, a father's first act of shielding her, not himself. The Horizon conspiracy ran deeper, its architects still hidden, but Marcus's confession was a crack in the wall. Abigail felt no triumph, only clarity. He'd failed her, not with malice, but with blindness. As she closed the file, a small envelope arrived. No return address, just Marcus's handwriting. Inside, his old Ranger pin, the one he'd once said was for soldiers, not dreamers. No note, just the weight of acknowledgement. The truth was out, but the real fight, who orchestrated the breach, was still waiting. Hey, if Marcus's confession hit you hard, drop a comment. What's a moment someone surprised you with truth? Like, share, and subscribe to see how Abigail's story ends. Marcus Tate's confession in that Arlington hearing room, shielding his daughter Abigail Voss's name while admitting his role in the Horizon Dynamics breach, was a quiet earthquake. It didn't erase the Yemen ambush or the years he dismissed her, but it shifted something in Abigail, the CIA's Shadow Cipher, who'd turned silence into power. The truth about the compromised contract was out, but the deeper conspiracy, the hands that pulled the strings, still lurked in the agency's shadows. Abigail didn't need revenge. She needed purpose. No longer content to be a ghost, she'd requested a new role, one where her 8 languages and hard-won instincts could shape others. Now, in a quiet corner of the CIA's Virginia campus, she stood at the threshold of a room that bore her legacy. The door's simple plaque read, "Shadow Cipher Suite," a nod to the woman who'd saved lives without ever seeking the spotlight. But as she stepped inside, the weight of her past and a final gesture from Marcus promised to redefine what victory meant. The Shadow Cipher Suite was no grand hall, just a modest classroom with maps on the walls and a whiteboard waiting for her words. Abigail, now 35, wasn't here to run covert ops but to teach strategic cultural intelligence, a discipline she'd forged in the field. Her students weren't rookies. They were veterans, analysts, and officers, their eyes sharp but skeptical. She wrote on the board, "Listening is the first mission." No grammar lessons, no flashcards, just stories of moments when a misdialect or cultural cue cost lives. She shared a tale from Yemen, not naming herself, about a linguist who caught a traitor's hesitation in a single pause, saving a convoy. The room leaned in, their doubts fading. Abigail wasn't just teaching. She was passing on a truth she'd learned in Quantico's silence. Words are weapons, but listening is the trigger. Her curriculum was her legacy, built from failures and triumphs. Misread signals in Kiev, a decoded Farsi poem that disarmed a warlord. She hired skeptics like herself, linguists who'd never seen combat, and techies who saw patterns where others saw noise. They called it the Listening Lab, a nod to her belief that understanding was the root of survival. One evening, a young officer, Captain Lena Bryce, lingered after class, clutching a file. "Ma'am, are you Shadow Cipher?" she asked, voice low. Abigail met her gaze. "What does that name mean to you?" Lena hesitated. "Someone who hears what's not said and saves lives because of it." Abigail nodded. "Then keep that definition." Lena saluted, a gesture Abigail didn't return, not out of disrespect, but because she'd never needed it. The moment was enough. That night, under Virginia's soft rain, Abigail found a package at her door, Marcus's handwriting on the label. Inside was a faded photo. Abigail at 11, hunched over her ham radio, eyes alight with discovery. A note typed simple. "You said words could change the world. You were right." No signature, but it was his voice, finally speaking her language. She pinned the photo by her desk, next to the ranger pin from his confession. It wasn't pride. It was continuity. Marcus had moved west, tinkering with a plane, never mentioning Shadow Cipher, but keeping a CIA file labeled Cultural Intelligence at home. Abigail didn't need his words anymore. She'd built a world where silence was strength, and her classroom was proof. But the conspiracy's architects were still out there, and she'd keep listening, for them and for the truth. Abigail Voss's journey as Shadow Cipher isn't just a story, it's a quiet anthem for anyone who's ever been unseen. From a girl tuning a radio in a cold Quantico house to a woman reshaping the CIA, she proved that strength isn't always loud. Her father, Marcus, learned too late that words could outshine medals, but his final gesture, a photo, a note, closed a wound without fanfare. Abigail's Shadow Cipher Suite now trains others to listen, to hear the truth in pauses, to turn silence into power. Her legacy isn't in headlines, but in lives saved, minds shaped, and a father's reckoning. The conspiracy that betrayed her lingers, but Abigail's ready, her ears tuned to the world's quietest truths. Wherever you are, carry this. Sometimes the loudest victories are the ones no one hears. Hey, if Abigail's story moved you, drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what's a silence you've turned into strength? Like, share, and subscribe to join our community of storytellers. Thank you for being here. Let's keep listening together.